Dr. Ashwini Sengupta. I'm a senior consultant and quality head at Medical Super Specialty Hospital. We are a conglomerate of 10 hospitals in Eastern India. This is the flagship hospital in Kolkata where I'm working. I'm also the lead assessor NABL and also blood bank assessor NABH. So I do say a fairly good experience in quality. Reason why I guess I have been given the to talk about this now PTEQAS Outliers. When they told me, even I was sort of a little jittery on speaking about this topic because it's something that I feel not much could be, probably everyone knows, but yet have not been able to put in certain terms or in an organized manner as to how we can go about the PTEQAS failures or when there are deviations from what are expectations from the PTEQAS results that when they come to us occurs. So how do we go about that? That is exactly what I'm trying to say. I hope it helps you all in especially the standalone laboratories, because that is going to be the main mainstay of the quality today in India, because the bigger hospitals, the bigger labs are already quality oriented into the process, but it is the standalone centers or the smaller centers and the middle centers which need to come into the foray and are going to be the mainstay of the quality assurance program entirely in India. So I am just trying to help as much as is possible, and it can be an interactive session. Please feel free to ask wherever you feel to ask like questions. Okay, so can I have the next one, please? Sure, thank you. So to start with it, how is the PTEQAS sent? It's the audit cycle is something I think that every one of you all is aware of, that we dispatch, the PT provider dispatches samples to the lab, the samples are received and they are analyzed. Results are then sent to the PT providers. The results that were sent by the laboratory are then assessed, are analyzed with other laboratories, and then the report is sent back to the lab. Now, after the lab has received the report, the lab has to not only receive and also has to evaluate or review its performance. If the performance is up to the mark or where there are any outliers. So, if there is any problem, then we have to take corrective actions or remedial actions, and how do we go about it? So, what is PTs? For that, what is PT and what is EQA? PT is evaluation of a participant performance against pre-established criteria by means of interlaboratory comparisons, where there are already established criteria against which your laboratory's performance is evaluated by the PT provider. And EQA is a continuous process. This is what is there in your laboratory. That is an audit process coordinated by independent external organizations, and it can be more than one section, more than one. There are definitely many parameters in the laboratory. Depends upon what sections of your laboratory have applied for the PTEQAS programs. So it's a continuous process. Quality itself is a continuous process. EQAS. Now, what does EQAS help us to do? An external quality assurance scheme or system that is there. How does it help us? First, it improves and maintains analytical agreement between the laboratories, because when we are saying that we are having either an NABL accreditation or a quality accreditation, then we are saying that our laboratory's performance is at par with the international standards and the international laboratories, because we are conforming to the international standards, that is the ISO 15189-2012, presently applicable standards. So when we are saying that we are conforming to these standards, we also mean that our quality should be at par with the other laboratories. So EQA is one of the major ways in which you can improve and maintain the agreement between the laboratories. Then also to identify any poor analytical performances, whether there is any particular parameter in your laboratory which is not up to the mark, or a test methodology, or even an equipment, anything, it can help you identify, because it's a continuous process. Time to time you'll be sending your results, time to time you'll be evaluated against the performance of the other laboratories and the methodology which you are using. So maybe it also helps you to identify those, then, and help in analytical problem solving. Many a times it has happened that in spite of very good IQC results or good laboratory performances, sometimes the single most EQAS outlier has been able to identify a problem in the equipment. So it is helpful many a times where it can be the sole indicator to a performance of your equipment also. Then what does an EQAS report tells you? It tells you about the accuracy of your results. It tells you about the percentage bias that is there, which it calculates as against that of the assigned values. The accuracy index is one that is A, and the standard deviation index. These are practically synonymous. And analytical precision, reproducibility of the reports. Though EQAS sample is supposed to be run only once, the similar way in which you are running all your samples. But sometimes there might be, it might present precision, and you might get a report saying, okay, the precision is not up to the mark, or in any particular parameter. So now how do you do the analysis? The analytical performance between labs, it can be for the same methodology and or the equipment. So you have to not only tell about your results, but also what methodology you are using, what equipment you are using, and then accordingly you will be assessed with the other laboratories and other methodologies. It can be same, it can be different. And because if your methodology is different from that of the others, you will be assessed in a different manner. Then current, also EQAS helps you to yourself assess your own performance from your previous performance. Whether the performance, it helps you in monitoring whether there is an improvement in your performance or there is any deterioration. It can be deterioration in the performance, it can be in the equipment, it can be a method failure, but it helps you continuously monitor the performance of the laboratory. Then what kind of analytical problem solving, when you have, there are kind of, what problems could occur? It can be associated with anything. It can be associated with your analyzers, it can be problems with your reagents, it can be problems with the personnel, new personnel coming on to the temperature, whether it is the temperature of the equipment. One of our, we had a major such problems where the temperature failures did result in, of the equipment did result in an EQAS outlier. So temperature of the environment. So these are the things that you will actually try to solve. We'll come and and see one by one as to how we are going to solve the problems. But the problems can be in any of these things, and you will have to analyze it one by one and try to see where the problems are there. So how should the laboratory investigate this problem? So first, EQAS outliers for most of the biochemistry or even your quantitative, all your quantitative performances are evaluated by the PT providers on the basis of Z scores, where all your results from the laboratory for all parameters are assessed as per the Z score. What are Z scores? This is nothing but the standard deviation from the assigned values that the PT providers give for any particular batch or PT sample results. So every laboratory's performance is actually evaluated as per the Z scores from the, that is the standard deviation from the assigned value that has been there for that particular sample of the PT provider. So when the Z score is -2 or 2, so if any laboratory's performance is between these two, it is considered as satisfactory. So you need not take any corrective action. The laboratory's performance for that parameter, for that methodology, for that particular sample is considered satisfactory. Then, and each individual parameter is assessed separately. But when the Z-score goes from more than 2 but is within 3, then that is considered as a warning signal, where the laboratory has to see whether there are any, all those problems that I said, you can have to assess whether there are any problem with the analyzers, the reagents, the personnel, or anything. And so if there is a warning sign, then the laboratory needs to look into first the sample, the methodology, the equipment, what has gone, and then, but it still does not warrant any action, can keep a watch. So this is like wait and watch, keep a watch. Then Z-score, but whenever the Z-score reported for any particular parameter, mainly quantitative analysis, if it goes above 3, either -3 or +3, then the action, this is called an action signal, or where the corrective actions need to be taken. So in that case, you would have to take corrections, and how do you go about it? So we'll see in the subsequent slides. Now, this is a sort of a flow chart which has been designed for handling deviations. So whenever your laboratory has received any kind of deviation from the, it can be quantitative, but there can be qualitative EQAS here also. So first and foremost, what you need to look into is the error in recording test results from the instrument. Most common. I guess most of us report our EQAS reports manually, transcribing them into format or onto the online systems, but they are manually transcribed, right? So most common place to have an error or a would be this. So first and foremost, the first action the laboratory needs to be seen is that whether there is an error in recording the test results from the instrument itself. Okay? So who does that? Mainly, most commonly, it's a technical person. Sometimes in my laboratory, it's a senior technician of that particular sections. We have assigned sectional in charge technicians in different sections who have the responsibility of all the quality performances. So naturally, that person needs to first look into, and so you need to review the process of recording result. Who is recording it? How is it recorded? When is it recorded? So that you can find out whether there was any problem or not. Then next is that after you have confirmed that there has been no problem in that, then you go, next step is to then assess whether there is an error in reporting results to the EQA organization. I have myself personally faced this problem where we have wrongly reported one parameter onto the other. So what happens, the results were right, but when it was transcribed onto the system or reported to the PT provider, it was provided wrong. So naturally this, it can be the senior technician or the quality managers of the laboratory who might have the responsibility. And in this, of course, if you need to know, you need to review the process of result reporting. So who is responsible for this, and who and how does the person do it? So once you review this, maybe you will be able to find whether there was any deviation in the process that has been defined or procedure that has been laid down in your laboratory. Then after you've confirmed that this is also okay, satisfactory, there has been no problems, then maybe you need to see whether there is a mixing of test results. Like I already said, how many of you all have actually faced problems of urea going on to creatinine, sodium going on to potassium? Very common, yeah. In IQC, yes. Also, it can be possible in any EQAS, whenever, because you're manually transcribing them into either the online system now or even the writing on the paper. In either case, it's very, very common. I personally faced a problem where the INR had been put onto the ratio and the ratio in the INR. So it did come out as an outlier. And then
naturally this warranted some action, which was actually not an outlier. So this is one of the places where mixing of test results, a very common mistake, the technical manager or the quality manager or the technician, whoever is responsible for this, the review process of that needs to be done so as to come to a conclusion whether there has been any deviation from the procedure laid down. Okay? Then after this, we continue. If it is still satisfactory, you go on further and see whether the report test results with wrong units. Larger laboratories, like mine, we have more than one test methodology for one parameter. A very common mistake of reporting one units with the other. For example, like I give from U per ml to IU per ml. So IU per deciliter. So very common mistakes that can be made, but then that, or if we have multiple parameters, one parameter's results onto the others can always cause a outlier. So we need to look into the system whether units which were given or along with the results are appropriate or for the year. So you need to probably go back to the instrument and see the result process or the wherever you have recorded the results, whether they're manually recorded or into the system, whatever, you need to look into the system. So after that, you will look into the report of wrong test methods or equipment. Whether you have given a wrong method. We had a problem ourselves with when we had started on to a new reagent from Astago, in which was the older reagent was one which they had already evaluated us against, and then that did cause a problem and we had to then report. Sure. And if the test methodology or the equipment or which you're reporting, if it doesn't match with that of your sample, if there is a deviation from that, then that may give rise to a EQAS outlier, and you need to look back into your system of result reporting, whether anything had gone wrong. Then the last, error in data entry by the EQA. Now, till now, whatever errors that we saw, these were the internal errors, the errors that can occur in the laboratory. But there can be errors from the PTA provider side, right? So sometimes if there is an error in the data entry by the EQA provider, I have sent the results, but then they have had a different results there. And then maybe an inappropriate sample. We did get that once when there was a mix-up of the groups, Group A and Group B. We received the other group sample, and naturally there was a problem. So mixing up of the samples or between the groups and mislabeled, deteriorated. We did receive once where we had to report back that and not only me, then we realized that not many of the laboratories had reported that the tissue section that was sent was deteriorated, and then naturally the analysis, then the EQA provider had considered that into when the evaluation has been done of the particular thing. So naturally, the result till the first 5, what we saw were the internal causes, which the laboratory can take care of, and the first thing that the laboratory should. But there can be problems that can be faced from the EQA part, the PT provider, like mislabeling, deteriorated sample, or inappropriate to you, where the evaluation of the laboratory and EQAS outlier might be there. So most common causes are transcription errors, and also there will be pre-survey issues like sample selection, whether you have made the right kind of sample selection, especially if you have more than one samples or more than one methodology, the homogeneity of the sample, and error in labeling, where there is any such problems. Then sample receipt and handling, whether the sample receipt and handling has been appropriate and timely, that can also determine whether EQAS reports are right or up to the mark. The sample quality, the physical integrity, like I said, the temperature maintenance, the lyophilized sample that has to be reconstituted. If these can also cause problems in your physical integrity of the sample and can give rise to problems. And test performance, how do we evaluate? Like who's done it, when it was done, and how. So if you see this, then there are a lot of problems you can save in your and analyze in your EQAS outliers. Then errors in data handling, one of the major contributors to errors, and report and interpretation. This can also lead to the errors. Now, what are the majority? Like I said, the majority of the outliers, one of the papers recently presented by the European Association, ECAT, is that they have said almost 81% problems of EQAS outliers are internal, meaning that it's a laboratory's responsibility. It's a laboratory's internal where it can be the one which can be resolved the most easily. Then next, almost 15% of the problems as per the European Association is that of the EQA provider, where the problems have occurred because the PT samples that they have sent. And last is the mixture, where it can be a mixture of both internal and external causes. So, but PT has some limitations. It is affected by variables not related to patient samples. Like there are something what is called as commutable and non-commutable PTs. That is, most of the PTs, they may not, what we do in the analyzers are patient samples. And PT samples may not completely resemble still most of the PT providers are now trying to see to it that the samples resemble that of the patient, and those are called the commutable ones, but most of them are non-commutable samples. But PT will not detect all the problems in the laboratory. It may not detect problems in the pre and post examination procedures, but a majority can be solved internally, like I said, consistently. But if the laboratory consistently fails to meet the standards and still there is no progress, and I guess then the management has to come into the play. And that's all, I think. I hope it has been helpful for you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ashwini.
Yeah.
On behalf of